Ah, there we are. Look at that. Beautiful. Now streaming live on Facebook.
Fabulous.
Yes, very good.
Right, thank you very much for joining us, Andy.
Yeah, cheers, man. Nice one. Nice to see you.
Myself.
Yeah.
What have you been up to today, man? Busy or?
Um, yeah. Oh, just like finalizing the details for our digital conference next week. So
Very cool.
lots of tedious admin, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Nothing overly exciting, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's been non-stop really. So
Yeah,
just
yeah.
working through a task list.
Yeah, that's always fun. I think in work for me, we've got this thing called what's called like trail. It's like a checkbox thing you got to tick off every day, and it's just like ticking that thing until you can finish. It's always very satisfying.
Bit of Groundhog Day on this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean for OCD people like myself, it's like I need that task list.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's what's difficult about it is that you're working towards the dream of an empty inbox.
Yeah.
The email just keeps coming, so it's really difficult. I mean, sometimes you get into like the sort of the low numbers, and you might have like 5 or 6 emails to deal with, but like
Yeah. Then you go to
it's
sleep.
rare. Those moments are rare. I mean, it's usually in the like 30, 40 sort of rolling, and you're just sort of like fighting against the tide. But
me and Ethan
yeah,
has sadly been the other way
I'm kind of
around.
getting up to speed now. I've had a couple of weeks off, with like having another baby.
Congratulations.
I mean, my wife
by the
had the
way.
baby. I've just
Nice.
been, sort of there to help in these few weeks. So it's good to take some time away from work. Obviously, really important time, but
Yeah.
but then you got to catch up, haven't you? After that,
Yeah.
so it's been full on, but just about there now.
Nice. Yeah. Well, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to chat to us. Yeah, on a lovely 6 o'clock on a Monday. So cheers.
That's the new Friday. It's the new 8 o'clock on a Friday, 6 o'clock
That's
on a
it.
Monday.
Yeah.
So.
I really appreciate it, and you've sort of like you've been flexible for me here, but yeah, it's part of like being a dad. I've got to do bedtime stories after this, so
Yeah. Yeah.
we can like do the conversation, and then I can do that. But yeah, my 5-year-old daughter would not forgive me if I didn't read her some stories
That's
before
fair.
bedtime.
Okay. Well, we'll try and keep it as brief as possible then.
Yeah, brief or as informative as possible as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
always good.
Indeed, yeah.
I mean,
Well.
we've wanted to have you on since we had Darren Edens on, one of the first ones that we did. So he speaks incredibly highly of you, and you've got quite the reputation in the not just the Welsh music scene, but the music industry in general. So yeah, we really appreciate you giving us the time and stuff.
Oh, that's good to hear. A good reputation, hopefully, not a.
Oh yeah,
quite the reputation.
I mean that in a good way. Yeah, not
Cool.
in a good fellas kind of way or anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah. How
you,
has sort of the last few months been for yourself, sort of business wise and sort of personal wise as well? Because obviously, kind of goes hand in hand with you, doesn't it? With the time and stuff that you spend with all the Focus Wales stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like been a really difficult time for everyone, hasn't it? Sort of like rolling with the punches and just trying to like adapt. But I just feel really lucky, to be honest with you. Like I had coronavirus like really early on.
Oh,
Really? And but at the time didn't quite realize what it was because it was so early on. So I kind of dismissed it, but I had all the symptoms. Was bedbound for like 10 days or so. Fortunately, I live in the sticks, so I isolated. I wasn't dragging myself into the office or spreading it around or any of that.
Yeah.
But having come through it, knowing how serious it can be, I feel really lucky, and professionally too. Really, I mean, say we've been able to adapt in ways that not everybody can. We've been able to move a lot of what we do with Focus Wales online and try and be useful in the moment. And not all organisations are able to adapt.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a really sort of roller coaster of emotions the whole time. And then obviously, my wife has been pregnant throughout the whole thing, so we've been isolating.
You've got to be extra careful, haven't you?
Well, yeah, extra careful going through all of that. So it's been insane. It feels like the hardest, like as Focus Wales as a team. I mean, Sarah's only just like sort of coming back into the fold now, but like Neil and I, these last few months, it's definitely been the hardest we've worked ever. And you know, we've been working from home. It's been really strange. You know what I mean? We're not like delivering shows. It's like all computer work. Just trying to like adapt and think of like creative projects that are going to be useful to the music community right now, and just try and untangle the mess that it created for us. Obviously, you know, we were going to be in May, so when this hit, it was like, you know, we were about to deliver the event. It was all but confirmed. Pretty much, it was like 95% everything in place. So it was, you know, nobody had much warning, but you know, if our festival was in the autumn, we could have taken a different approach to things maybe. But yeah, it was, it hit us with loads of work immediately, and not least because actually we were going to be taking 7 artists from Wales to South by Southwest. What's that, second week in March? So when it hit home that, oh yeah, we are going to lock down the UK, and South by, it was around, I think that came about a week after South by cancelled, maybe a week and a half, something like that. South by Southwest cancelled, and we were immediately full on from that point, because, you know, we had artists, I mean, we had the artists who were going out, and suddenly, you know, in many cases it was their first occasions to go to North America and play shows, and they were just trying to, like, you know, fix that, you know, touch base with everybody that they'd arranged meetings with, and try and keep those sort of conversations going, whilst also trying to get their money back for flights and hotels, and, you know, the sort of chaos, the behind the scenes as a result of a festival like that cancelling is insane.
I kind of forgot. Thinking back on it now, I'd forgotten about it being cancelled, to be honest, but it seems so.
Well, yeah, at the time it was the biggest thing ever for like the artists involved in the industry.
I remember being like, oh no, like it was like buzzing and stuff, wasn't it? And
this is the thing. It was, you know, high hopes. Adwife were going to be there too, and the school, and Buzzard, and Campfire Social, and Dan Bettridge, and I'm going to leave someone out.
That was. I remember thinking like, fuck me.
We'll add them in post.
There were 7 artists going out there this year, and Rosehip Tea House, obviously, can't believe I forgot them. But yeah, a fantastic bunch of bands that we had going out, and obviously it's a big deal. It's a big opportunity to present yourself to not just North American industry, but industry from right around the world.
It's the world, isn't it?
And you know, last year, you know, bands did get solid outcomes out of it, and already we'd managed to connect Rosehip with the big indie label, who were based between Austin and London, and you know, that's happening. But things were sort of coming together ahead of South by, and it was like, it was such a frustration. But at the same time, you couldn't be too frustrated with it, because it's like, well, there's a bigger picture here, and this the plague is like popped up out of the earth to take us. So you know, they have to cancel. We have to deal with it, and then, you know, that occupied us right up until the point of the UK government announcing that they were doing the lockdown. Domino effect means everything's cancelled, and you know, we made the call early on. Really, I think as soon as we could, it was, you know, the UK government were very cryptic at first with, you know, locking things down. They were essentially telling pubs and venues that they weren't legally not allowed to open, but they were telling people not to go out. And it was like, well, all right, this just means like we're not going to be able to do it. And, you know, we lean on, there's a consultant that we work with, he's sort of like 14 member that we do go to for advice on key things, you know, if we're going for a big grant or something like that. And he's very helpful, and he's also a retired doctor, which helps. So we lent on this good friend at that point, and we said, what's your take on it, you know? And he was like, well, you know, I've been on these doctors forums, and we're all convinced it's going to take at least a 3-month proper lockdown, you know, at that point. And he was obviously bob on about that, which is why we cancelled pretty quickly. You know, the other festivals hanging on quite late. We were obviously trying to be hopeful and optimistic that we might be able to do something in the autumn, but
it's not
I think
been
we
the
got
case.
to June and we realised there's just no possibility really. You know, we'd been engaged with, you know, meetings with Welsh Government pretty much on a weekly, at least bi-weekly basis from early March really. you know, to the credit of Welsh Government, they have been pretty well engaged with the wider creative sector in Wales, and, you know, getting their advice, and, you know, them getting, you know, the wider creative sector around the table, so to speak, even if it is on a Teams meeting online. You know, we quickly got a sense of, you know, no, everyone's preparing for next spring, and they were doing from, I think, you know, from mid-April, certainly by early May, everybody had woken up to the reality of it.
Yeah.
So from our side, yeah, we hung on an extra couple of weeks just in hope, really, that there might be some sort of silver bullet that emerges. But yeah, sadly, you know, we've then ended up having to like postpone it a second time. But you know, as I say, one of the silver linings of it is that the pandemic has got a lot of good people around the table in a way that there's never really been an excuse to get all the different like festival bookers from Wales around the table, or all the venues around the table, or all the recording studios. And now you have all these new organisations popping up, and, you know, you've got like Bernie from Music Box talking to Steve from Rock 2 in Wrexham, and, you know, they're all sort of helping each other and giving each other advice. And it feels like the music community has come together in many ways. I mean, I'd hope everyone feels like that. I mean, that's certainly my take in it.
Well, yeah,
nice.
Just when we sort of had a pre-chat, I said that's the same thing that I've been noticing. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of doom and gloom around, but the majority of people have been incredibly optimistic and trying to find positive ways to do it, rather than just, you know, having a moan. Everyone loves a moan, don't get me wrong, myself included, but as long as you're willing to back, thank you, man, willing to back up the moan with some, you know, positive attitude, or, you know, something that can actually come out of the end of it, is always good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's mad, man. Like, talking about, because to be honest, I completely forgot about the South by Southwest thing. It's all happened.
Like, Ethan's finger
it's
is
all
always
such a blur.
firmly on the pulse.
It's all such a blur. But I guess sort of doing a bit of a rewind, maybe it'd be quite interesting talking all about that, to hear how sort of like you initially got into booking and like starting the festival. And obviously it's coming up to, or would have been the 10th year this year, right? But you're sort of doing it.
So our next edition is the 10th annual edition, so to speak, or, you know, this year should have been. But yeah, okay, so I guess, I mean, like everyone in music, it got a grip of me when I was about 12, 13. I really got into guitar music, I guess, primarily. And, you know, all my mates were like learning Rage Against the Machine riffs, and
sick.
I took an interest in wanting to learn those riffs. And it's funny, I was thinking about this, you know, like inspirations for wanting to get involved in live music. And I think before I really become very musical, I ended up somehow like singing in a band before I could play an instrument. I must have been like just gone 12 or something like this, you know, so like new in high school sort of thing. You know, we used to do these like occasionally these like lunchtime shows in the school theatre. And I went to Ysgol Glenclwyd in St Asaph, central North Wales, and we were lucky really, because we had a theatre. I think it held about 250, 300 people, maybe, the theatre, and it's probably less. But when I look back, I remember it being big.
Rose-tinted
like Wembley
glasses.
Yeah, it was like Wembley, you know. But but I think, you know, it was certainly able. It was a big school, Ysgol Glenclwyd. I think like maybe 1,100 kids or something. For the secondary school, so it wasn't a small school. And so the facilities are pretty good, to be fair. You know, we had like rehearsal spaces with like kitted out rooms with like drum kits and guitar amps that you could just like go and rehearse with. So there were loads of bands. You know, and you know, when I look back now, like lots of people who came through Glenclwyd around that time. I mean, it's forever churning out bands. But, you know, at that particular point, it was pretty insane. And we did a show, I think it's for like children in need or something like that. You know, that was the excuse for allowing us to be able to put on a show, because otherwise we'd just be like knocking out the riffs in the practice space. But the school said, no, you can do a show, and like we'll get buckets, and, you know, everyone will put their 50p in or whatever. And it was brilliant. It was packed out. And as I say, I wasn't really playing music at the time. I just suddenly was a singer in a band. And I just remember it was like a proper sort of all the bands were on stage just playing like Killing in the Name of. And you know, like the teacher comes in to like cut it off because you gotta get back, and everyone giving it like, you know, fuck you, I won't do it. And all the kids went insane. And it was like, you know, I just remember thinking that this is like, what is going on? This
I'm a rock star right now.
Life has peaked.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I wasn't the front man of that situation either. I was just like one of the many kids on the stage, and it was like a good friend Divvy who was he was fronting the band, you know, he knew all the words to the Rage tunes, so he was like giving it 10-0, and there's about 7 guitar players playing the riff. But it was epic, yeah, and it was just it was a moment that made me fall in love with music at a really young age, you know, and from that point onwards, like most tales, I guess, I was just like in loads of different bands, some just pure fun hobbyist bands, whatever. But started taking it seriously by the time I got sort of college age, 16, 17, and I started writing a lot. And you know, I was fronting bands and I was getting up playing my songs on a weekly basis at open mics and just trying to like find my confidence with it all. And then formed like what I think of as my first proper band when I was about 20. And then we got a record deal when I was about 22. And nice. You know, it gave me like lots of experience in the industry. You know, it was the first time I got to tour across the UK, and we did like, you know, live sessions for Radio 1, heady heights of doing a session for MTV, which is cool.
Nice.
But that
Cribs
band
next,
was like it was like the proper roller coaster experience. You know, it was like we covered a lot of bases. We in that we had like loads of ups like that. You know, we did like loads of smart stuff, and you know, supported Happy Mondays and played on bill with Super Furries once, and you know, grew up like adoring Super Furry animals. So you know, we did some smart shows like that and had some really great experiences, but we also split up before the album came out, you know, when it was just getting going. And that the experience was really good. When I look back now, it gave me such a solid understanding of like, well, the ramifications when you don't follow through on deals and all of that stuff that comes with, like, you know, signing a record deal and then not fulfilling it and all of that. Fortunately, there was never any sort of like, you know, problematic complications that come out of it. But it was really interesting, like, moment in time for me. And it sort of informed a lot of stuff going forward. So then, you know, when I went on to other music projects, it really, that experience of like understanding the contracts and understanding everybody's role in it and whose responsibilities were what, just made, like, I don't know, made me a bit more, I think personally anyway, my take would be just a bit more efficient at getting stuff done. So like, you know, the bands I was in after that, which you mentioned Darren Edens earlier, that's how I got to know Darren, because, you know, my band went to Canada, we got a record deal out there. Darren was the first person who ever put us on actually in Toronto in like, I think it was like 2012. And it was part of that same trip. We went out and played a thing called Canadian Music Week, which is like, you know, like long 25-year established, maybe 30 years it's been established in Toronto, like Focus Wales style events, but, you know, bigger. And yeah, we got a record deal on that very trip. So we went back and on a number of occasions, and Darren toured with us. And this is how we sort of built that bond, and how, in a way, it played its role in Darren ending up living in Wales years down the line, you know. But I think, you know, as I say, a lot comes back to that experience of being in a band and, you know, having opportunities, but then learning from those failures, because, like, you know, it imploded like, you know, Buckaroo sort of band, you know, it's like what could go wrong did go wrong. But it was like really, really useful. And as I say, it meant that I got to do some stuff a bit further on that like made, you know, it made me be a bit more hands-on and take control of it. But it made me understand, and then as a result, then I understood how the different sectors worked a bit better, because I was less sort of reliant on managers or labels or just other people. I understood that I was entering into sort of, you know, it's like a two-way street, the agreement, do you know what I mean? I've got to like honor my side of it and all of that. So it was like a really useful experience in that respect. And then that, doing all of that stuff, you know, over those two projects, you know, you're talking like 1,000 shows on the road. and it sort of really helped sort of motivate us to Focus Wales, because over that journey, you know, as I said, Canadian Music Week there and many others along the way, we'd seen how music communities in different parts of the world had these events like what we turned Focus Wales into.
Yeah.
And we thought it was a bit of a crime that Wales didn't really have it. You know, and we moaned about it privately. It's like, oh, why doesn't Wales have an event like this? And, you know, waiting for someone else to do this thing, you know, skills of telepathy, just like projecting.
Yeah.
Want it to exist.
Someone else do this. Don't want to do all the paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. And then we thought, well, we should give it a go at some point, and you know, we might fall on our faces, but like, let's give it a go. And we were quite surprised really by the amount of support that we got from the get-go, that people agreed and wanted it to happen and got behind it and offered us advice and guidance the whole way, because we've learned on the job really. I mean, like that, you know, like developing the Focus Wales idea, like I'm one of the co-founders, and the other co-founder, Neil, grew up with Neil. Neil was probably on stage playing the Rage riffs, thinking back. Almost definitely was. So yeah, grew up with Neil. And throughout my journey of being in that first band, you know, Neil was the in-house booker at a venue called Central Station in Wrexham.
Great
from
venue,
about 99, 2000. Yeah, you know, you know, he put it on the sort of venue circuit, really. So, I mean, everybody coming through in the noughties played there at some point or other, because he had his finger on the pulse and he got them in at an early point. You know, and there were some like classic examples of that, of, you know, getting bands really early on and it's selling out 500 people, really exciting. So Neil was building up that experience too, and seeing it from the side of things of being a promoter, purely a promoter, also a musician, but that was occupying his time, you know, and he's building that sort of network and that experience. And as I say, I was sort of being really hands-on with like being an artist. So I went to uni in around 2008, 2009, and that's where the sort of idea started to blossom, because I was living in Neil's house, and we'd have these moaning sessions about it not existing. And then, you know, he was like, well, we do have some venues up here, and why couldn't it be in Wrexham? Oh, that's an interesting one. Why couldn't it be in Wrexham? It could be in Wrexham, couldn't it? But then, like, we talked ourselves out of it being in Wrexham, like in the first edition, and we gave it a go in Llangollen, because Neil had started booking for the Llangollen Fringe Festival, and built up a bit of a network there, and we had convinced ourselves that it might make more sense there. So actually, the very first edition, this might be an exclusive, I don't know, but the very first edition was going to be there for anyone who's like kind of discovered Focus Wales in more recent years, but it never happened, it never materialized. And we have that first year, Funeral for a Friend, Blackouts,
that South Wales alternative scene, that first wave of South Wales alternative scene,
loads of those bands, and a good mixture of stuff. Really, we had like Racehorses coming through at that point, and like, you know, it was like going to be like a 45, 50 sort of band in terms of its scale event. And the pavilion in Llangollen at the time, they just pulled the rug from under the event. You know, they'd committed to production costs, so basically paying for the PA and lights. And then they pulled the plug on it, but not only pulled the plug and said, we're not going to do it now, no, it's like off the table, we don't want to do it. I think they'd realised that potentially there were noise issues, and they have noise issues around events that they put on there all the time. You know, that they have to send letters to all the local residents and all of this, but whatever their reasons privately, they pulled the rug from under us with only a few weeks ago, and we moved it to Wrexham. And I think it was because of that sort of it being on the sort of tipping point of failure that made it really work, because everybody was like, no, how dare they do that? And it's got to work out, it's got to succeed. You know, our friends in like Wrexham music community had seen that we'd been working really hard and getting this off the ground, and they all sort of got behind it and really championed it, and like, you know, shared the hell out of the online flyer and the physical posters and all of that. And it was great. And we had like about 800 people or something over a couple of days the first year, but the vibe was brilliant. And it was like, it was the springboard to go on and develop it. But you know, I told you before this, so like interject if I rabbit on and maybe digress.
No, it was good, man. It's fascinating, like hearing about how it could have been in Llangollen and then sort of moving back to Wrexham. And I mean, I loved it when I went the first time. It was mad. It was so wild. I think, like I said earlier, it was like 2015 or something. With Chroma, I was shooting for them, and it was just sick. I remember going up and being like, like it's Wrexham. Like I've never been there before. It can't be like, how good could it be really? And then I got there and I was like, this is fucking wild. Like it was so good.
I think there is an element of like, you know, people might come with, well, maybe not so much now, but like going into like the sort of second, third, maybe fourth editions, people are like maybe low expectations.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel like Wrexham has like had a lack of investment over the years, and certainly like post-recession, you know, it's taken time for Wrexham to get back on its feet, and was actually starting to regain a bit of confidence just when this pandemic hit, you know, which is like another tragedy of the whole thing. You know, we were starting to see people invest in the town, and new businesses and bars and restaurants were popping up. But for a number of years, it was really struggling post that recession in like 2008. And you know, so people had the lower expectation, and they'd come to it and say, oh, actually no, it's actually, it works really well. I think one of maybe the things it really does have going for it as far as putting on an event like ours is that a lot of the bars are really close. So if you come as just, you know, regular punter, or you know, someone working in the music industry, you want to cram in as much as you possibly can, you know, so you can get value for money on your wristband. And the venues are next, you know, they're pretty much next door to each other. You know, you might have to walk 50 yards, but you could go, I want to watch 10 bands tonight, and you could do it without, you know, without really having to work the legs, which is not the case in some of these bigger events in, you know, if you, again, I don't want to name like big festivals or throw them under the bus, but some of the like more longer established events that have been going for like 30 odd years and in bigger cities, and it's a proper workout on the legs if you do want to try and cram in more than like 5 bands, or you're spending a fortune on taxis hopping from venue to venue. But yeah, I think that's like delegates love it for that reason, because they, you know, they never have to jump in a taxi, and you can cram in loads. And the people of Wrexham, I mean, the thing is, Wrexham, I mean, I think, I'm not from Wrexham. As I say, I grew up and I went to school in like Glenclwyd, like central North Wales, and actually grew up in a village called Trelawnyd, which is like, you know, craggy island, if you remember Father Ted. It's like you know, like there's nothing in Trelawnyd really, but for farmland and a phone box and a pub. A nice pub, a nice phone box, a nice farmland.
Yeah,
but
well,
like,
that's it.
yeah, you know, you have to jump on a couple of buses to get to the nearest place, really. And Wrexham, to me, as I say, it's not my hometown, but I discovered its charms over the years, really, and how friendly and welcoming the people have been to me. As I've grown up, and just as a music community, really welcoming. And we just knew actually that if we put something on that was like inviting industry, inviting the rest of Wales, inviting people from outside the UK to Wrexham, that the people would love it, and there'd be really good hosts. And you know, and that's just beyond the venues, but like people running cafes and hoteliers and just absolutely everyone. And it's been proven to be the case, because you know, it's one of the things that people say, that, you know, I said they're a really quirky hotel, and or they were really lovely and went, you know, above and beyond, because you know, it's not every day we get people coming from like Madagascar or Brazil to play in Wrexham. So it's mind-blowing for the locals when we have, you know, this international event there, and it's mind-blowing for me when it materializes, you know. But I don't think we would get that same sort of excitement or enthusiasm if we were doing it in a bigger, I mean, be honest with you, if we were doing it in Cardiff, I think it would be a struggle in that respect, because Cardiff has so many cool things that happen year round, that you know, and international things. It's a bigger place, obviously, and you know, bigger universities and all of that. I think the fact that Wrexham is a smaller place makes it work logistically, and as I say, makes it work in terms of that enthusiasm that we sort of garner in our community.
Like Ethan said, the first time he'd gone to Focus Wales, he'd never been to Wrexham before. Whereas, I mean, a lot of people who've been to Cardiff, for example, so they don't necessarily, or been to Birmingham, been to Manchester, been to Sheffield, tram lines and things, but Wrexham, and this is no disrespect whatsoever, but it's not somewhere on the map, if you know what I mean. So when you go there, you get literally the best out of it when you're there. Like I had one of the best weekends of my entire life up there, Focus Wales, with the guys from Falls, and like drank way too much Sambuca with the Joyful Middle, and didn't think I'd ever be in a position like in that situation anywhere like that before. And it's like,
Brilliant.
yeah, it works so well, and it's perfect. So many people, drawing so many people from around the world there to show them like the quirkiness and the friendliness of that place is really, really endearing.
Yeah,
it's
and
good. It's good to
Wrexham
hear.
lager is.
Yeah, well, we've got good local producers. To be honest with you, we're actually Tiny Rebel actually provide to give them a plug. They actually provide the beers for our riders and across the bars now, which is brilliant because I love their beer.
We try and get them to get us free beer, but Ethan just wears the t-shirts for fun.
Yeah.
But it's good. I mean, I think all those elements play an important role, and it's like it's the makeup of someone having a good time when they come to an event, isn't it? And you know, how you're looked after, and I think being somewhere interesting and unusual. I mean, one of the sort of challenges of Focus Wales has been over the years for us is just the nature of running venues. It makes it difficult for people to sustain keeping venues open. And quite often people running venues have to move to different buildings and rebrand, and you know, we've had a lot of that to contend with. So planning long term isn't always easy, and we've had to think on our feet. We've had a number of occasions where, you know, we've got to January, February and a venue's closed, and we've had to move, you know, 40 performances to a brand new space. So it all needs to be re-advanced, and all the artworks need to be done, and in some cases contracts redrawn, and but ultimately then that means that the people coming back to the festival are like, oh wow, I've never been in this building.
There's something different for them to experience every time.
Yeah, hopefully, you know, and hopefully a good thing. I mean, I've got to be honest with you, like I've so fallen in love with multi-venue festivals. Like I'm definitely that, and I'm not just biased because we do an event of this nature, but like I do much prefer spending my time at these types of events where you get to discover a town or a city, and you know, spend time seeing a mind-blowing performance in a church, or go to sort of a mothballed retail space that's been turned into this amazing pop-up venue. I enjoy those experiences a lot more than I do trudging around in mud in wellies nowadays. I just, maybe that's me getting old, but I've just done so much of like the Greenfield Site Festival, and there are so many of them in the UK that like I do love it when I get to go and really explore the town itself. And I know, and also, you know, I know if I go to an event in like, you know, like you mentioned Sheffield, you go to tram lines, that you go and eat in a restaurant, or like, you know, you sample a couple of the interesting bars in the city, that you're helping the economy of that place in a way that doesn't really happen with Greenfield Site festivals, you know, because quite often
they're quite self-contained, aren't they, really?
Yeah, it's big deals with like food and drink quite often, and it's like it's leaving the host economy. And you know, we don't create like an event like Focus Wales with that in mind, but the more we've done it, the more we realize that the town actually really has a big boost financially as a result of the festival, and it's sort of a welcome injection at that particular time. Injection, I shouldn't use that word, but it is a welcome sort of morale boost and financial boost in early, you know, sort of like mid-spring or whatever when we do it, for those bars, and it really gets people going ahead of the summer. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't change it with that in mind. You know, I think
something like Focus.
nice.
You sort of alluded to venues having to close, but I would say something like Focus, and going at further afield, sort of like Great Escape Festival and Tramlines, they must have a big part in helping venues stay open, because they know they've got once or twice a year big groups of people from all over the country come in, and it's, you know, a good thing to tell the council, for example, like, we need help for this because it's such a big part of a wider picture than just the building and the bricks and mortar. It's a wider picture to that. It's an industry that's involved in it as well, and you help with that.
Definitely. I think, you know, these types of events, just talking broadly now, not just in the UK, but you know, around the world, they you know, they play a role in changing people's perception, you know, sense of place. We put on an event like that in Wrexham, as you've pointed out, you know, it's often a first introduction to the town, or to the place for people. On many occasions over the, you know, over recent years, it's been people's introduction to the UK. and they come and experience this. You know, there are many international artists in industry who come just to our event and then they skip on into Europe and they have plans across France and Germany and elsewhere. So, you know, it can play like a significant role in changing how people think about a place. But yeah, I mean, that side of it, the economy boost is like really important. Because I said earlier, Wrexham was like really sort of on its arse after the recession, as many places were, but like it just felt like Wrexham was really hardly hit. And you know, we had a lot of empty retail spaces throughout the town pretty quickly after that, and the recovery, as I say, has been long in the sort of in the rebuild. And I just hope, you know, literally as lockdown came, there were like 3 new restaurants about to open on the high street.
Really?
You know, so I'm not exaggerating when I say it was literally about to get going again. But it looks like these places are primed and ready to give it a go when we can properly reopen, whenever that is.
Yes.
So it's like cool, you know, I'm optimistic. I'm definitely on the sort of positive forecasting side of things.
Yeah.
You know,
you've got to be, haven't you? Like the whole, especially someone in your position as well. It would be a shame if all of a sudden you turn and go, I'm just going to shut up shop because everything's going to be terrible forever because there's so much more. Yeah, like that's it. We're out. You know, it would be a terrible thing to have. That you've got to have that. I mean, obviously we alluded to the chat before, but that positive mental attitude to help you through what's going on now, because it's so you know, no one alive now, as far as I'm aware, has had to go through something that we're all going through now.
No.
But you know, it's a different economy, it's a different industry, it's different politics, it's different this, that, and the other. We're all sort of in it together and all trying to figure it out at the same time.
Yeah, it's you know, it's like I alluded to earlier. I do feel like there's been like a real sense of community within the wider creative sector in Wales, and it's been the first time that certain people have got around the table together and, you know, been able to offer each other's perspective and advice and help to each other. That's been a real positive that I'm quite hopeful we'll take it forward with. I mean, there are projects in the works that we're involved in, for example, collaborating with 3 other festivals in Wales right now that hopefully we'll be able to announce in the next few weeks. But there's many things like that are happening. I see collaborations between studios, rehearsal spaces,
nice.
Between record labels. Everybody's, I think, understands that it's a really delicate ecosystem. Everybody relies on everybody else, you know, and it's like, we can't allow organizations and venues to die. We've got to look after them. We've got to lobby together, make sure that funding and support is in place and that people aren't forgotten about. Obviously, significantly includes the freelancers that were so often not part of the discussion. And I've been sort of encouraged by that sort of that sense of sort of community. I mean, maybe I'm like over romanticizing it, but you know, it might be that with a lot of people, maybe it's not sincere for everybody, but I think there's a lot of good that's been happening in the background, and a lot of positivity. So. In you know, in our sort of team structure, it's funny because like I think you do have to have a sense of realism. For organizations who might come across as being doom and gloom, you've got to sort of give in their defense at the same time. People do have to be realistic, and you know, there are organizations that have to plan for potential redundancies and have to, you know, everybody has to plan for worst possible case scenario, but at the same time I think you can have one eye on best possible outcome too, and you can try and be positive. And people laugh when they speak to like Neil and I, and we're both in the same meeting, because Neil's like this, like, you know, this really sort of realistic view of like, well, you know, worst case scenario is definitely this though, isn't it? Let's remember about the worst case scenario. Whereas I am maybe like the most optimistic and hopeful in some regards, you know. And you know, even now, like talking about treatments that might come in or like vaccines that might come in, and I know it's a contentious topic, but like I am hopeful that we can get back on track from early spring. And I think we've got to be, because venues need to be able to reopen.
So we hope so, because we've got some gigs booked in for April time next year, and it's just like the most nerve-wracking thing to know that everything's booked in all behind the scenes. And we might not even be able to announce it in the first place, just because we could be told that everything's going to be closed up again. Like, it's heartbreaking, really.
It is heartbreaking, and
Yeah, it
what
sucks.
I find like frustrating really is the talk in the UK of like, what's essential and what's non-essential. And when you start talking about festivals being cancelled, there could be an element within society of, oh, diddums that you've got to cancel Glastonbury. And let's like, pick on that big one, because I'm friends with a bunch of people who work there, so I know I can do it and they
You
know
get
where I'm
away with
coming
it, yeah.
from if they were to watch this back. But you look at Glastonbury and people go, oh, what a shame, whatever, it's got to cancel. The truth is that Glastonbury supports so much, so many freelancers and workers. I mean, the site build alone, it's like it's a
like
long
2 or
time in
3
the
months or
making.
something like that, isn't
It's a
it?
big
Just
Yeah,
building the site
it's
itself.
there's a
All
lot
for
of
5
work
days.
that goes on and sort of barnacles onto a festival like that. And the same is true of a festival like Green Man. It's responsible for giving work to so many, let's say, freelancers and artists who are coming through, and the same goes for our festival. It's a big team, and suddenly all those freelancers are lacking that work, and what it means for the economy, the wider UK economy. I think it was possibly quite eye-opening for a lot of people, when the Let the Music Play campaign really kicked off, and people started throwing around the stats of what the UK music industry brings to the table. I know a lot of like friends who aren't involved in music that I was speaking to who were like wowed by it, and it was like, well, of course, when you think about it, it's like there's like thousands and thousands of people who work in this industry, and the attitude initially was like, well, it's not essential, is it? So,
There wasn't there that argument, people saying like the arts and music and everything is non-essential. Obviously, I don't believe that. But then they're like, try spending 24 hours in your house without listening to music or reading a book or watching the telly or any of that. It's like you physically cannot do it. You can't. You're not allowed to go on social
Stare at a
media
wall.
because somebody has sat there and designed all the artwork and stuff for it. Like you can't. It cannot be done. And I mean, it felt like a slap in the face because I was a musician as well as doing promotion and stuff, and it felt like you were just told that what you've done or what you're passionate about for the last 20 odd years just means literally nothing, and it's just a glorified hobby. It's awful
I
the way it's
mean,
been treated.
Focus Wales move in, it's like there's 1,000 musicians that are involved in Focus Wales, and direct employed and non-direct employed, you're talking circa 250 techies that will work across it, coming in with touring bands, those that we also employ direct. Volunteer opportunities for those who are getting their foot on the ladder for the first time, through partnerships that we have with universities. They're missing out on that career defining moment often. And I say that genuinely knowing that people who've worked with us have gone on tour in the world, the London Grammar, Mumford and Sons, and like massive globally touring artists. It can play a really important role, and suddenly that's not there. And all those people that have spent their lives building up to that point, or they're established freelancers, tour managers, sound engineers, lighting designers, they suddenly don't have that. And the government were basically saying, well, I don't know, it's like it's
tough.
frankly not good enough. And I'm just hoping that that the support package will be extended, because you can't just say, go and get a job in Tesco's or whatever, because at this point where you've toyed with the idea of reopening places and giving work back to these people, and then we're on the eve of them closing it down for a period, clearly, these people, those opportunities have gone, because people who had to look at new work and get, delivery driver for jobs or whatever it may be, those opportunities have like kind of disappeared. So there's so many people who are sort of left in limbo by the thing, and it'll be pretty soon. I said this wouldn't be doom and gloom, but unless the support is put in place, then people are going to be struggling. So we've got to sort of make a lot of noise about it.
I was made redundant from my job working in an online ticketing company, because obviously the income from that is having events on, no matter how small or how big. And when they were told they were to stop, obviously everyone in our office, we just panicked and were like, it can't stop. It's not allowed to stop, because we've all got bills and stuff to pay. Like this is how we make our income and stuff. And like I said, it's all that wider creative industries as well that a lot of people sort of overlook. That they're not people. Sorry, general public overlook it as well, but it's been overlooked by politicians or local councils or whatever, or anyone that's able to offer any support, which is a shame. I
Yeah,
realise we're going on quite this negative
no,
downward
but I would say
arrow
on a
doing this,
positive.
sorry about that.
No, because it's. I mean, to be honest, it's a really important point and should be discussed. And I think the more people are discussing that topic right now, the better.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, there's a lot of people who need that conversation to be happening. You know, I feel very lucky that, like my organisation, the work I do, we've been able to adapt and sort of firm things up for the short to medium term by doing like new projects. But like as we say, you know, not everybody's able to do that, and some people have just had all their work taken away from them. On a positive, I think it's been good to see how engaged Welsh government are generally. You know, and I would say to anybody actually who might be watching this, you might think, well, I've not had support, or I don't have a direct line to them. If you're working in music in Wales and you do need support, then anyone can like email us and we'll do our best to connect them. And it's just info@focuswales.com will come through to us and we can connect you, whether it's the right places, connect you with someone within the Creative Wales team at Welsh Government or with someone at the Arts Council of Wales. There are people there that you can get people on the phone, and from speaking to like counterparts, people doing similar work to us in England and Scotland, I do feel like, you know, we do have a bit more of a direct line in Wales. It is easier to get people on the phone and get that crucial advice. And sometimes that the answers aren't there, but the answer might be, we'll know in a week, or, you know.
Yeah,
but
having a person to speak to changes everything anyway. It can just make you feel more confident in that help is out there, or just support is there too.
That's really nice, man. Thank you for putting that forward. That's
we'll make sure, like, obviously when this gets recorded and we'll put it up online, we'll make sure we put all the details and things in the comments or in the description so people can see that. That's really, really good that people know that they can reach out to you as well.
Has you know, you mentioned about people reaching out to you and always sort of like trying to look after people and looking after the sort of like the local Wrexham economy through the festival. And in our pre-chat, you talked about artist development. That's always been something that's been important to you then. Is it sort of like passing it on, I guess, is the expression, isn't it? You know,
I think
paying it forward.
To be honest, that's the whole spirit behind the festival, is like to put the best artists coming through in Wales on a platform so that they can connect with industry. And you know, everyone's needs are different, and it might be that some artists are just like passionately DIY and they don't necessarily want a record label or an agent or all the traditional pieces, but they might want to connect with media or just a bigger audience. And we just felt that it was the responsibility of someone within Wales to put on an event like this so that artists coming through had a voice, and significantly artists of all genres. So there was a time where, you know, like we mentioned like the Blackout and the Funeral for a Friend earlier, and you know, there was a reason we went after those bands in our first edition and booked them. Ultimately they couldn't make the rescheduled festival, sadly, in Wrexham, but we went after them because we felt in some respects those bands were successful in spite of a lack of support within Wales. And there were a lot of entities and events that happened that would just ignore that. If you were playing like alt rock or anything that didn't fit into a particular sort of NME champion mold, then you'd be overlooked. And that was true of like kids making like metal and rock music to people making dance music.
That's kind of what
and
Sean
that seems
was
like a
talking
head
about
scratcher
last
to
week.
me.
Sean was mentioning that, saying that all those bands from the like Merthyr or like South Wales during, I would say, what, early-ish 2000s. I don't want to make Sean much older than he actually is, but he said that basically it is to do with they succeeded in spite of not having the support, and
forming their own community and contacts and things.
Which I know he did also say, and he's right in saying he's not the only musician, and they're not the only band to make a scene like that in everywhere else in the world. It happens all over. Every person thinks, oh, there isn't anyone there who wants to listen to my music, I'm going to create my own music scene. But that's how it works, isn't it? And then that just turns into the wider thing from there.
I think it's good that artists like that will look back and go, you know what, we had like challenges, and maybe we didn't have the support we would have wanted earlier on, but like we overcome that. But it's about the artists that don't that didn't succeed because of a
Right.
lack of support. And you do wonder, because quite often, and I guess ultimately at the root of my motivation to do it was that my first band were quite fortunate really to get a deal. I found at that point in time that there were like much better bands around us in Wales who weren't getting any love, that weren't getting a deal. And you'd look at it and like scratch your head and think, well, sometimes it's like it's where they are. It might be the geography, it might be lack of access to advice, or the lack of an opportunity for them to be in a room with industry. So like something wasn't working. It was like disconnected, and it was even more disconnected for certain genres. So right, at the seed of like starting Focus Wales, it was like there's all these unloved genres. And also if you're making music, if you're based in Fishguard, or like growing up in Trelawnyd, like I did, you're almost like we're forced to sort of go to the biggest sort of areas. And I find often it's like the artists making the most interesting music are, like often in like the beautiful little villages dotted around Wales. And I hated the idea that we were kind of saying to people, oh, you need to move to Cardiff, or you need to move to London if you want to connect with industry. There's like scenes and important, London's important as far as music market, and it's on, there are neighbours and there's loads of opportunities there. But in this like internet age where we could reach
really
out and there's opportunities all around the world,
Yeah.
I just felt insane that we hadn't done it yet. And we hadn't created this thing. So the more I talk about it, it just makes sense, doesn't it? I feel like had we not done it, someone else would have done an event like ours within a year or two. I always felt like Soon, almost did that, and like Soon's like a brilliant multi-venue hop, but I think at its core it was a cool event, but it wasn't as wide in terms of like its programming as like what we felt needed to exist. So really bringing in rock and just as much folk and trad and just everything. It's not easy to cover everything.
No,
and there are reasons.
You'll always miss something out.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be some artists who's fuming that they were left out. We receive 5,000 artist applications each year now. It's mental how sort of oversubscribed the application process is. So you can never please everybody. But I think all we could do is try. And each year that we do an edition of the festival, our ability to be able to add another stage and grow it a little bit, because we're getting more delegates, more the general public come in, so that we're not thinning the crowd out by adding stages. We're adding that ability to add a dedicated niche genre stage somewhere. So we are getting there now, but we can always do better. And I think it's this moment in time, 2020 has been a really good opportunity to sort of take a step back and think, what we could do more to help artists coming through in this genre, or this particular music community is maybe being overlooked, and what can we do to engage them a bit more.
It's great that you're already at that position where you can do that now. Like, it's not like you said back in the day where you're like, oh, why isn't somebody doing this? You actually are at the position now where you can be that person that does it, and it's not really any much more work because everyone knows what you're all about anyway. You're there to champion new talent and help with existing talent play to a different audience, or give that new talent opportunity to play with the existing talent. Like, it's really great that it's built up to this really good networking industry festival.
Appreciate that. I mean, that's been probably one of the challenges to communicate that to the wider music community in Wales, that actually the whole point is that networking and like the connecting thing. So like you should be coming to it whether or not you're playing it, because that same opportunity exists for you at the event to meet A&R and from labels and agents and people working in music media. But it has taken time, to sort of get that message across to people. But we're seeing it year to year now that musicians will just rock up because it's like, well, maybe they haven't recorded anything yet, so it's like still too early days for them to get a showcase at the festival, but they're really sort of eager to learn and want to meet people and want to be ready. So when they've recorded that first EP, they've built up a bit of a contact base so that they can reach out to people. And I feel like generally amongst like we said about not using the word wave early, didn't we? But like the new wave of artists coming through in Wales generally, I feel I don't know, they're a bit more positive, I think, generally, and open to learning and open to what opportunities that there are out there. I think one of the things we want to overcome, though, is it'd be great if there was some sort of bursary that existed, sort of cover the costs of, if you were a 16, 17-year-old musician based in Pembrokeshire and you wanted to come to Focus Wales for like a few days, well, how could you do that? Like in terms of like the costs, the costs involved with it. So it would be great to explore that. And, we have planted a couple of seeds in that regard. And like, I'm hoping something might happen. I know Liz from The Moon was talking about the potential of going for some funding maybe to bring some people up.
Yeah. It's quite the carpool though, that's the problem, isn't it? It's quite the carpool that
yeah, or just well, I think there's a lot that can be done. I mean, there's so many, like, obviously of the 250 bands, maybe 80 of the bands from overseas. And my maths, I can't do any maths right now, but there's a big portion of the bands coming from South Wales. So there's a lot of people who can sort of like get a lift up, and there's creative ways to get yourself up to the festival. That said, that kind of relies on nepotism, doesn't it? And like, oh, you need to know someone who's playing and you might be able to blag a lift up. Like, my concern is for that person doesn't know anyone who's a bit like out the bubble, and are yet to meet anybody in music, but they're doing something quite cool, or they're just at the beginning of that stage, and it would really help them to come and hang out at Focus Wales. So we're working on that. And as I say, we've planted a couple of seeds, and hopefully by next October, we'll be able to put something in place. So, young people will be able to apply for a grant of support to get themselves up to it for a couple of days.
Yeah, because at least just for the networking side to it. Because I said to you, I went up there with no idea what I was doing, just doing merch for a band. But the second you turn up and you pick up your passes, you're already brushing shoulders with people from magazines and then photographers and other musicians from around the world. It's the second you get there, you network. From the person you meet at the table giving you your envelope full of stuff, you're networking with them, and it doesn't feel like that. But personally, obviously, tell me if I'm wrong, at other festivals that are the same sort of thing, it is more for professional and personal growth, I would say, for a lot of musicians and just people in general who want to go to see things like that.
Amazing. Thank you for saying that. We must be working then.
And that was 8 years ago and I still remember it.
Wow. Yeah, it feels like, I mean, if I look back then and think, I mean, it's dramatically changed from even 2018, 2017, it's so different, just in terms of scale and how we do the conference. And but it's a learning curve, and every year, it's funny, however successful an edition of the event might be, there's always a behind the scenes shit list that's massive that we're like, oh God, we can do that better next time. And we didn't think of that, did we? And, and obviously going into next year now, thinking about implications of, well, just hygiene, and ensuring that everywhere is COVID safe. I mean, the interesting thing about doing a festival where it's a multi-venue festival, it's the license holder's responsibility, but as the promoter, we feel, as I'm sure you guys do, it's like we share that responsibility to make sure that, we can confidently communicate. You're going to be safe and sound if you come to our event. Hopefully, next October, we've got over 12 months to go until the festival. Best part of 13 months. Hopefully, at that point, a lot of the restrictions will be removed, but who knows? So we're on our toes as far as that's concerned, and just sort of waiting, anticipating that we'll have to factor in new things in terms of risk assessments and making sure our venues are prepped for it. But I'm just hoping there's not too much by the way of restricting capacities, because social distancing at shows is just a non-starter. Does not make sense.
We said that, didn't we, Ethan, before, that it's either full capacity gig or no gig. Like, it doesn't work in between, because it doesn't work for us as promoters. It doesn't work for the artist, because you don't get the same atmosphere. It doesn't work for venues because they can't take the same amount on the bar, for example, and be able to pay the staff the same amount of money. And it just all in all is, don't get me wrong, I'm all for it. It's to make it safe as possible, but there's no point putting 10 gigs on in a venue and then that venue has to shut down because they haven't been able to keep up with bills and things due to a regulation that's not their fault in a way.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's a really strange one, isn't it? Because historically, it's like, where would the responsibility lie? It's like, if you were really poorly, like I've got a bit of a sniffle now, hopefully I'm not gonna, hopefully it's nothing too serious.
Just the sniffles.
Yeah, but it is just a sniffle, so I'm convinced I should be fine. But
it's all about positive.
I wouldn't go to a show, to be honest, with this sniffle, because I think I'm just gonna pass it around, or I'm gonna meet up with friends and be like, oh yeah, I've got a bit of a cold. Welcome to my cold. I wouldn't do that.
Sharing is caring, Andy. Sharing.
No,
is caring.
but do you know what I mean? In all seriousness, though, it's like everybody makes those personal decisions, and some people would think nothing of it and they just go out with a bit of a sniffle.
Yeah.
Unless I really, really had to, I would avoid it and get myself better, and I'd go out when I'm better. I wouldn't go out when I've got a bit of a lurgy or I'm feeling a bit unwell, and they're the sort of decisions I would make pre-COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
And going forward, I would hope people would make the same sort of sensible decisions. It's
I just don't like going out, so I just try and stay in as often as possible. So everyone's safe around me. So.
Well, that must like you must be all right in this situation then.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to go anywhere. I'm really missing it, I've got to say, and the sooner we can get back to it, the better. I saw Melvin from Festival Republic. He gave his point of view to the DCMS committee. When was this? Last week. And then within 24 hours, Boris Johnson was paraphrasing it like it was his idea, this whole idea of a pass that would essentially mean that, you would have to get like potentially a test within 24 hours. This is assuming that the tests are better. In the terms of the turnaround, then it would show that you've not got it, and then you would be able to show via an app when you get to any venue that you've had a negative test within 24 hours.
Yeah,
it's like mitigating risk. It doesn't mean that you're definitely going to be safe.
Yeah,
but the chances are, you're going to vastly reduce the odds on spreading the virus across an event, and it means that's theatres, sports events, and music events significantly for us can reopen. I mean, it's probably the most solid idea I've heard that people have come up with in most recent times, and I was amazed to UK government suggesting it like it was going to be a real thing. I mean, you can't help but feel that it's just something he's thrown into the mix while he's under pressure, to be honest.
Distract us from something else. But
well, yeah, I mean,
we said we were going to get political, didn't we? It's my fault.
Well, no, that's it. But it's like, obviously testing times, and under the caution, it seems like a political win. But from my side, I'm desperate to see things open up. You obviously want things to be done at the right time and for the greater good. I've got like family shielding, and you don't want things to sort of get out of hand.
Yeah.
And you want people to get through it. It might only be a few more months that we've got to hold out, and there might be more treatments and things in place that means we can open venues up again. But I'm generally optimistic that that we're on. It's a bit like we've been running a marathon and we've got like a few more kilometers to go, but it feels rough right now.
Yeah,
because we've been through it.
We're at the wall. We're at the wall.
Yeah, it's the mental wall. But I think we haven't got a huge journey to go. And you know what? And actually, that's a funny analogy to make, because one of the things I didn't probably mention in terms of like this year and what it's meant for me is like one of the things that I did discover that's really helped me is like running, and like primarily inspired by Jimmy doing his like running punks.
Hey.
And it's
so good.
I love Jimmy so
honestly,
much.
It's like changed my life. I think this year I've like been running so much, and it's like we started a little Focus Well Strava club. I'll send you the link if you want to join it.
Nice.
It's just like it's just served as good motivation to get out, and it's like a good head clearer, physically, mentally, really good thing for me anyway, personally. But I couldn't endorse that anymore, really. It's like been such a positive for me.
Nice,
Get your
man.
trainers on, innit? I'll send you
Good,
that
yeah.
link after this.
Yeah,
And if anyone
yeah.
wants it,
So,
just pop
yeah.
it in an email.
I'd sort of just bringing it a bit closer to home now in terms of like where we are at the moment. I'd quite like to hear maybe a bit more about the Out of Focus thing you've got lined up, and that's like next week now or something, is it?
Just before,
Yes.
Jimmy has just started watching. Just as you speak of him, his ears must have been burning.
Oh, has he? Oh, he must be running punks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, I do love running punks, and yeah. Just to reiterate, Jimmy, keep up the good work, man. I think
Yeah.
it's like doing a lot of people a lot of good. But yeah, certainly for myself and for people working in music generally, it's an unhealthy place to be, or has been historically for me anyway. It's you got to regulate yourself,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's a lot of festival for me throughout the year when I'm not doing Focus Wales.
You
And
can get burnout.
I found running. I started to get into it before this, but when the pandemic hit, it was like, right, I've got to regiment myself now into a good routine. And like, if it wasn't for running punks, yeah, it wouldn't be quite so. I wouldn't be quite so on it now. But yeah, Out of Focus. I mean, the whole spirit of doing a digital conference in amongst it all was, well, as I say, we're all about like developing. I hate saying talent development, but like trying to be useful to our music community and connect artists with industry in ways that work for them. And as I said earlier, it's like different for everybody. And like some people are proud to be DIY and don't necessarily need to connect with some entities in the industry, but sometimes all you need is a sounding board. And you need to throw your ideas at people to get their perspective on it, to reaffirm or to change your mind on how you want to do things. And yeah, I mean, that was the idea really. We thought, well, let's do an open call and we'll select a bunch of Welsh artists and we'll put them in groups with compatible industry. So we've got, the likes of Line of Best Fit and Bella Union and Glastonbury Festival, and the list goes on really, of people who can give solid feedback to these artists, hopefully work with them going forward. And that's the idea. So that's like non-public facing side of Out of Focus. So people won't see that. That'll just be to the benefit of the artists. And it'll be like Zoom calls and there'll be breakout rooms. So it's this sort of thing. But as I said, they'll have their own private meetings within it.
Nice.
And then there's going to be like a whole bunch of public facing stuff where we've got people talking about how to make money out of like your videos on YouTube. We've got like a lad that I grew up with, actually, Gaz Evans, who he's got like, I'm sure he's got like 1.5 million subscribers now to his YouTube channel. He's earning a living out of it and building an audience for his own music, and he's been really creative in how he's done that. And he's a YouTube award winner, and he's living in, I think, Rutland near Rill. So he understands the challenge of trying to be a musician in Wales and find your own feet with it all, but he also understands how to monetize that really intriguing thing that I think a lot of artists neglect, to be honest with you. We've seen everybody sort of like take a look at their YouTube channels in the last few months and go, oh, probably should do something with this now.
Yeah, we need to up our numbers, Ethan, by the sounds of it. I'd like to pay my mortgage with YouTube. That would be great.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying YouTube is the only thing to do, but just in terms of like using your video content and like making the most of it. Because like a lot of bands will make a video, put it on Facebook, and maybe beyond like a little Facebook push with a $5 or something, might not really push it again. And there's lots of things that you can do. We've got people who are experts in synchronization and getting your music into video games and movies. And there are artists we've selected that aren't necessarily looking to pursue careers in live, that are just composers that are like making really good filmic music that that is perfect for getting onto film, but they could do with a hand connecting with a sync company. So we'll just try to be useful. So we've designed Out of Focus from that perspective. So there's a whole bunch of panels. If people go to focuswales.com, then there's like an Out of Focus tab on there that gives you like a breakdown of everything day to day, Monday through Friday, for all the conference stuff. I should probably mention we've got a keynote with Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics, which we're really chuffed to have live from his home in the Bahamas.
Nice.
Doing like an in discussion actually with Grant from the Tracked app, Grant Tilbury,
Okay.
and the emerging Welsh artist Otto. So they're doing like an in conversation because they've collaborated through this technology. So again, the whole point of that is not to talk about what Dave did in like the 80s, but just to highlight how he's passionate about this new technology, and how artists can be collaborating on the internet to write and just create, and not necessarily to come up with a single at the end of it, but just for that like creative process. So we're doing a whole bunch of stuff like that. Then on the Saturday, there's going to be like a streaming marathon. So we've got the artists doing like live sets from home. They've been really creative with it, so I'm excited to share that. That's going to be like 12 until like 7 at night. So, you know, people can tune into that. We're announcing that. We've partnered with a broadcaster for that, so I'm excited to announce that in a couple of days.
Fantastic. It's going to be great.
Yeah, but then, you know, people can get a ticket. I mean, the interesting thing for that I don't think we probably made enough noise about. I was about to criticize them, but we could make more noise about this. I think is there are tickets available for, like, you know, for delegates, people who work in the wider music industry. But if you're working in music in Wales, or just the wider creative sector in Wales, to be honest, you can apply for a free pass. It's just a little form where, you know, we just ask you to explain what it is that you do in Wales. You could be a music manager working in media, and then, you know, basically anyone working in music in Wales, we're going to sort them out so that they can access this, because the whole point is that it's an intervention. It's, you know, people are struggling right now, they need to connect, they need information, they need help and guidance. So that's the whole sort of spirit behind it, and hopefully it'll do that. I'm pretty optimistic about it.
It sounds good.
It does sound really, really great.
Yeah, for sure. Right, I'm conscious now that we're going to be running over a little bit for
bedtime stories.
Bedtime stories.
Maybe I think unless there's anything else you particularly like to sort of like leave on or finish on, mate. But I think
I would just, you know, I guess the main thing for us is I mean, I just wanted to let people know that they can get a free pass if they're working in music in Wales for Out of Focus, because the key thing for us that I'm hearing from a lot of like talent development organizations, you know, I speak to like Spike at Forte or like Beth on Doing Horizons, and like they're worried that, like, you know, young musicians are at, like, it's been a mental health challenge, this, as much as it has been a challenge, you know, directly in people's careers and jobs and whatnot and financially. But like young musicians who are just about to get going in it are sort of asking themselves, well, is a career in music for me? And we don't want those people to like fall off the radar and like go down another route. We want them to like pursue their passion. And so like I just want to make as much noise about the fact that they can get a free pass for this, and hopefully they get that, log in, they might find some inspiration in it and come out of it the other side thinking, you know what, actually I could do something in music, whether it's on stage or off stage. So I'm really keen for that message to get across. And obviously the festival, we've the thing we didn't touch upon, you know, we postpone the festival each time, but we have salvaged the lineup. So next October, Focus Wales 2021, our 10th edition, has been pretty much salvaged, but I did hold back about 30 slots. So we're reopening the applications for that in late November to give the opportunity for some wildcards to apply and blow our minds, and we can go, right, let's find them something. So there's that. But then if somebody wasn't, as I say, there's only a small number of slots there, but if somebody wasn't able to quite get on the bill for Focus Wales 2021, for one thing, just come to the event and hang out, as you guys have been like doing a good job of sort of getting across. There's loads that artists and just like young people who want to work in music can get out of just being at the event, really.
It's a great laugh.
You just want it. Exactly. There's plenty of good times, definitely, but and hopefully you can learn a few things and build a network. But Focus Wales 2022 will hopefully, the plan is to be back in our usual May time period. So which will be fun and games for us, like to get that together after next October.
You won't have a lot of time between, well, technically this year's one next year and 2022 one.
We're working on it already, basically. So we'll be opening applications for 2022 next summer. Okay. So I would just say, you know, to any artists who are like wanting to apply for a festival for next year, being mindful of the fact that most of it is already booked. To not be too disheartened if they don't get a slot. Like as I said, there's like 5,000 artist applications, so it's extremely competitive, and it often just comes down to really fine margins, you know, as to who gets a slot and who doesn't. But for 2022, you know, we'll have something like 300 slots, so it all starts again, fun and games, and hopefully the world will be back on track. And
fingers crossed.
Yeah,
wicked.
So hopefully
It's
that's a positive note to finish on.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us tonight, man.
Oh, nice one. Thanks for doing this. I think people should be sharing as caring, isn't it? You know, unless it's a killer virus, obviously.
Keep that to yourselves.
Keep that to yourself for sure. All right, wicked, nice one, man. And good luck with bedtime and all of that, and a bit soon, hopefully.
Nice one. Well, I mean, if not online through Zoom and Out of Focus next week, before we know it, you never know. You never know. Hopefully, I'll get down to one of your shows in April. Is that your first show?
Yeah, it's first show back April.
Fingers crossed. So
14th, I think we got. Yeah.
That'll be it. Wicked. Nice
positively.
one. Thank you.
Yep.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Nice one, guys. Good to see you.
Bye.